Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight for our first Catalyze the Vote virtual town hall led by the Younger Chemists Committee. My name is Stephanie Ramos, and I am a current YCC associate. This evening, we have President-elect candidates Dr. Peter Dorhout and Dr. Thomas Gilbert, along with our moderator and past YCC chair, Doug Hausner. The CtV initiative focuses on increasing younger ACS member involvement in ACS governance and elections. If you don't know what the YCC is, we are a group that advocates for and provides resources to early career chemists in order to lead young professionals into successful careers and active roles within the society. Before we begin, I would like to go over some key information about the election process. You must be a member of the ACS in order to vote. If you are a member, an email was sent out on September 9th earlier this month that allows for you to select a paper or electronic ballot. The ballots will be mailed out or sent out in an email tomorrow on September 30th, and the polls close on October 28th. We will be having a special YCC polling day on October 11th, where we ask that everyone votes together. Once you vote, use the hashtags CatalyzeTheVote and I voted in order to be submitted into our raffle. We will be giving away something that people periodically ask about on November 1st, so remember to let us know that you voted. We will be reminding younger chemists of all these dates through our social media, so it's the perfect time to start following the YCC on Facebook at ycc.acs and on Twitter at YCC_ACS, if you're not already. With that, the YCC is pleased to congratulate the two candidates on their selection for the 2017 ACS President-elect. Doug Hausner, past YCC Chair, will now introduce our candidates and lead us into our questions.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you to Natalie and the rest of the Younger Chemists Committee for giving me the opportunity to moderate this event. And also thank you to Peter and Tom for being here tonight and agreeing to participate in this event. We're very glad to be able to spend the evening with you. I'm going to start off by introducing each of you before we jump into some questions. So let me start off with Peter. For those of you who don't know our candidates, we have Peter Dorhout here, a 31-year member of the American Chemical Society. Peter is at Kansas State University, member of the local section there, and he has served as Professor of Chemistry, Dean of Arts and Science, and most recently as the Vice President of Research for Kansas State University. Peter has spent time working in both industry and government laboratories. He has served as an elected ACS counselor for 14 years, including 3 years on the ACS Board of Directors. Peter is currently serving as a member of the Committee on Budget and Finance, and is the chair of the Committee Communications Subcommittee. Peter, at this time, would you please share with our audience about your platforms if selected to become ACS President-elect?
Sure. Thank you, Doug and Stephanie, and to everyone who's out listening. I appreciate the efforts that have gone into planning this event. My platform focuses on 3 key items: jobs, education, and being an inclusive society. First, I'll consider the final recommendations from the current Presidential Task Force on Employment, which has reacted to the difficult employment situation we chemists are facing. Specifically, I plan to create an industry partners advisory board with member stakeholders from Corporation Associates, Division of Small Chemical Business, INDC, CPT, YCC, SOCED, the Graduate Education Advisory Board, among others, who will become a standing advisory board to advise ACS on matters of employment, education, and training for the chemical workforce, including entrepreneurship. I will build stronger alliances among the ACS education partners to promote the highest standards and safest chemistry training programs for all chemical professionals, especially new ones. And lastly, I will advocate for diversity and inclusion within the ACS to continue to promote and recognize outstanding contributions by its members who work to improve the opportunities for all chemical professionals, which includes, for me, to make growing the ACS Scholars Endowment to support scholarships a priority of the Society.
Thank you, Peter, for your dedicated contributions to ACS. We look forward to hearing more about your experiences as we continue with the event. Now, let me take the opportunity to introduce the candidate that's with us here tonight, Dr. Thomas Gilbert. Tom was born and raised in Western New York and educated at Clarkson University. After Clarkson, he went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he earned his PhD at MIT in analytical chemistry. From then, he went on to work in the research department at the New England Aquarium. And then after that, he joined Northeastern University faculty in 1981. While at Northeastern, he has served as the interim dean of School of Education, and most recently from 2015 to 2016 as the acting chair of the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. He was a member of the ACS Council from 1990 to 2015, serving as chair or vice chair of the Council Committee on Meetings and Expositions, Nominations and Elections, and Council Policy Committee, aka CPC. Tom, could you take a few minutes to introduce yourself and the audience to your platform that you would provide if selected to become ACS President-elect?
Well, thank you, Doug, and thanks to the many hard workers in YCC for organizing this event. This is a very neat opportunity for Peter and I to spread the word. From my perspective, the word has a lot to do with what, first of all, I believe ACS does and does well, and there are many, many things that I believe our society gets right. At the same time, though, I think there are some things we simply need to do better. At the top of my list of things to do better is to simply make membership in the ACS more valuable for a broader cross-section of chemistry professionals and for students aspiring to be chemistry professionals. My particular focus are those chemists who are working at the traditional boundaries of chemistry in cross-disciplinary fields such as biotechnology, medicinal chemistry, energy production and storage, material science. It's a long list, but it's an important one because it includes emerging technologies and centers of innovation where skilled chemistry professionals play key roles. So the challenge I believe facing the ACS is to make it clear to all of these very interesting people who are doing work at the cutting edges of science that ACS membership is important. So what I would do is to organize a campaign to simply spread the word that ACS membership is valuable. And I would start with our youngest members. I would start with our student members. And I would support innovative programs featuring networking and professional skill building and outreach programs that emphasize K through 12 science education. I would create a national model for cooperative education in the chemical sciences based on successful programs such as the one we have at Northeastern. There's another at Cincinnati, and there are others. And I would promote partnerships between graduate faculty and industrial chemists, which might include industrial internships for doctoral candidates to expand graduate students' experiences and broaden their skill sets. And finally, I would support professional science master's programs in the molecular sciences to meet industrial workforce needs. And that's just my grouping for the youngest chemists. I have additional ones for mid-career chemists. I think one of the things we need to do for those folks is to offer professional development opportunities, which should be at no cost, by the way, for unemployed members, that build the knowledge and skills that they need for jobs in emerging technologies. And finally, if I am elected in 2018, I would propose to host presidential symposia that will be organized by industrial chemists for industrial chemists. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We're glad that you're able to join us tonight, and we're excited to learn more about your commitment to become ACS President-elect. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, these are our two candidates, and now we'll move forward with why we're here tonight to be able to have a question and answer session. Please make sure to continue to submit your questions throughout the event tonight, as we'll be taking them as they come through. Our first question I'm going to start off with, though, because we know this is a hot button issue, and this was touched upon by both of the candidates when we did our brief introductions. So let me go ahead and ask this one. So we understand a pressing issue at this point in time for younger chemists is unemployment. Can you go into a little bit more detail in terms of specific plans that you have for increasing programming for underemployed or unemployed chemists? We're going to start with Peter and then go to Tom for this question, and we'll alternate as we go through the questions. So with that, Peter, would you like to address this first question?
Sure, thank you, Doug. To start out with, it's important to note that unemployment among ACS members is actually pretty low, below 4%. However, for new degree holders, the level is 14%. This is a demographic that sits squarely in the YCC focus area, and it's one of the most diverse demographics ever. That group that's between 20 and 29 years old right now has over 50% women and better than 20% from other underrepresented groups. We're at risk for losing these folks from ACS and the profession. So ACS already has a lot of free programming for unemployed members, which is very underutilized compared to the numbers of unemployed members that we do have. We've been tracking the usage of the websites and the Career Navigator, and they're very underutilized. Those benefits can be found on acs.org/unemployed for those of you who are listening. ACS needs to better communicate to our younger chemists what's available. I don't think we're using the right venues to communicate what's out there, and I would turn to YCC to help me as the president, help the society sort through the best way that we can reach out and encourage folks in this particular demographic to utilize what we do have. Now, that's not to suggest that there isn't something new that we can do. I will promote a program to fund pilot projects in local sections and at regional meetings to host more professional development workshops and promote our members. In my day job, I meet with a lot of different industries here in the Midwest, and what I hear time and time again is that we have a lot of jobs available in the chemical sciences and chemical industry, but we're just not getting folks with the right experiences and the right backgrounds. Tom alluded to this. I was a co-op student myself, and Northeastern does have an exemplary co-op program. Internships and externships are exactly the kind of thing that we need to be promoting, because the industry is telling us that the students that are coming out of our colleges and universities just simply aren't prepared to work in their environments.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. Now, Tom, again, you did address this in your opening statement, but would you like to address this as well in terms of specific plans and programming that you'd like for underemployed chemists or unemployed chemists?
Yes, thank you, Doug. Well, Peter made an important point that, you know, we have a lot of folks looking for work, and at the same time, almost ironically, we seem to have a fair number of employers looking for employees. And so the question becomes, how do we make a better connection between our workforce who are looking for work and the needs of the current chemical enterprise, especially given the fact that so much of that enterprise these days is not in the traditional fields that we think of as being chemistry. They are in these sort of boundary areas that are, in fact, the emerging and rapidly growing segments of our economy. So clearly, I think ACS has an important role to play in better connecting our members, especially our younger members, and indeed our student members, to the job opportunities that await them when they graduate. And so I think it is terribly important that folks like our Committee on Professional Training, who emphasize the importance of aligning the basic knowledge and the skill sets that are imparted to our students as they go through our approved programs of study, that they also include an experience component, which really provides that extra piece that young people need to get the kinds of jobs that they would like to have. And so the notion of integrating experiential education into undergraduate programs, and indeed into graduate programs too, through faculty industrial chemist partnerships, those are things that we need to promote, I believe the ACS does. And we are in a position to do that. We already have a record of innovation in our design of approved programs of study that are part of our Committee of Professional Training oversight. We need to take some of that same oversight and extended to the graduate side of the house as well. And if we do well in those two areas, we will have a better match in the future between the folks who are leaving our universities and the employers who are looking for good people. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So both of those are excellent responses, and based off of some of the things that you're saying, let me throw another question back at you here. I think we've handled the subject of unemployment quite well through the first discussion here, but Peter brought up a topic about underutilized services, and Tom, you mentioned the value of ACS membership in your introduction. Those two things together, made me want to ask the question, along with the different things that we've discussed before, what other things within the society do you feel are being underutilized by the membership?
Well, this is an old story for us in ACS, because ACS is a very large organization and it does many things. The difficulty we have is making the information available to all of our members, that so many things are available to them as member benefits. It's only simply a question of, asking. And so and of course we've wrestled with this for years. How do we make it clear to our members that there are things out there that are available to them? Many have no cost involved. How do we better connect the needs of our members to the ways that we have to meet those needs? And certainly in the younger chemist side, there are things that we simply need to do better to, create these connections. Peter mentioned in his earlier remarks organizing special events, for example, the regional meetings that would essentially provide a clearinghouse to provide this kind of information to younger chemists. In fact, parenthetically, next week there's going to be a regional meeting. It's the Northeast Regional Meeting in Binghamton, New York, and there is a special session. It's called Navigating ACS and Your Career, a guide for younger chemists. And it was organized by the Northeastern section of the Younger Chemist Committee of the Northeastern section. So indeed, that is already happening, and that is what has to happen more, I believe. We simply need to reach out to places where we know younger chemists are going to congregate, like, for example, regional meetings, and provide these kind of venues so that they can learn more about what ACS can do to further their careers.
Well, thank you, Tom. Peter, would you like to address this question regarding underutilization of ACS programs and resources?
Sure, Doug, thanks. You already heard me bring up the Career Navigator, which I think is grossly underutilized. I've spoken a little bit about that Presidential Task Force on Employment. I happen to sit on that task force, and I've shared some of the findings from the task force and gathered some data for the task force report ultimately recently at some local, regional, and national meetings. And I actually polled ACS members about their knowledge of the Navigator. Very few people even knew that it exists. So I think that resource, for one, is underutilized. I think it would be greatly enhanced, however, if we were to consider bringing in some outside career consultants. We make use of a lot of volunteers. Volunteers are outstanding members of the society, and they have great advice. We don't always have someone that fills every single gap in the employment navigator sector, and so I'd really like us to consider employing some professionals in the career navigator space that can really serve as career consultants, primarily to younger chemists, but I think to folks who have found themselves out of work after 20, 30 years and are seeking advice on how to build their careers back. My other advice, and I think it's underutilized, and Tom brought this up as well, that being engaged in the local section YCC and other similar networks in local sections and regional meetings in particular are also very underutilized. I've seen a resurgence in some regional meetings, and I'm looking forward to going to Binghamton. But I think that's a again, an underutilized resource where, particularly if you're looking for inexpensive meetings, the regional meetings and the local meetings are perfect for those emerging in their careers. Many of the events that I've seen highlighted at the Chem Luminary Awards, for example, are all about social networking events for chemists. So I think that's one remaining option, or one option for us. And finally, those networking opportunities provide a chance for you to get to know a fellow chemist that's local to you, and identify a mentor early on in your career, or another student member. I think that we underutilize mentoring in ACS, and that's something that I think we ought to be promoting.
Well, thank you very much. So we have a question here from the audience. This is on education, which is a major platform for both of you. So let me see what we have here. So education. So what is your platform in terms of approaching education to help students beyond K through 12 prepare to enter the workforce? What are the key skills that you deem necessary for those students to be successful in academic and industrial positions? So why don't we go to Tom on this one first?
Okay. Well, you know, our colleagues in the Committee on Professional Training have actually identified for us a number of skills that they believe are essential if young people are going to pursue a career in the chemical sciences and be successful at it. Certainly problem-solving skills is always at the top of everybody's list. Although, you know, you got to be a little careful here, because problem-solving, you know, you can argue, well, if you've done the problems at the end of the chapter that you're working on, whatever textbook you're using, you've got problem-solving skills. Well, yes or no. I mean, there's lots of ways of looking at how authentic some of those problem-solving situations are. Problem-solving is a rather complicated process, and unless students really become systematic problem solvers and can handle new and unusual situations with some dexterity, they're not really quite as skilled as they need to be if they're going to get the kind of jobs they're looking for. Other skills include, you know, being able to search the chemical literature, be really good at using SciFinder, be skilled at essentially finding out what other wise heads have, you know, thought of in the past before you essentially duplicate their efforts. That's an important skill. Communication, obviously, terribly important. So much that we see of students not performing well has a lot to do with the way they can express themselves, either verbally or in writing. Team building skills, another important one, especially if we're talking about an industrial position. But even then, if we're talking about team skill building as happening, say, within teaching laboratory settings or in classroom settings in upper-level chemistry courses, you're kind of in a very homogeneous preaching to the choir situation there. And what you really need to do is to be very good at communicating and working in teams that cut across disciplines and have folks from outside of chemistry working with those of us inside. And to do that effectively takes some additional skill development. And of course, there is ethical decision making. There's just way too much in the news these days about the importance of making it clear to young people as they are developing their science skills that the importance of ethical decision making cannot be underestimated. It is just a key ingredient to avoid some of the embarrassments and, you know, downfalls that have occurred in recent years. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. I know how important education is to both you and Peter as educators. So, Peter, let's go to you with the same question regarding you know, K through 12 workforce preparation and what types of skills those people need for academic as well as industrial positions.
Well, Tom did a great job working through and analyzing the CPT recommendations. Those are really spot on, and I think to help with either or any career path, frankly, you should be engaged in undergraduate research and develop leadership skills as well. I am a strong proponent of undergraduate research here in my day job and in previous jobs. And developing leadership skills, it can be in other university organizations, it can be outside in your community or through the ACS leadership development system. Leadership skills are often overlooked. Now, both academic and industrial jobs require strong communication skills. Tom brought that up. I often recommend to our students or to young professionals that they ought to try improv or improv theater. There are a lot of improv groups out, particularly in college and university towns. I think that it gets you thinking on your feet, and it really helps prepare you for the quick Q&A that comes up in real life, including webinars. Teamwork. Tom talked about teamwork, and you can get that through research, through co-op, or other kinds of project work that you can do at the university. Global perspectives is something that as more and more companies are global and the jobs are appearing all over the world, whether it's in rural areas or in urban areas, global perspectives are very important, and I try to encourage as many students as possible to look for those short study abroad programs, look for an alternative spring break that could be overseas, where you can work on projects together. There are funding agencies overseas that will support a student to come and do research at a university with a university partner overseas. Learning how to do research in a different environment and a different culture really opens your eyes to how one can work on that problem solving. And I can't forget safety. Safety is critical, and understanding how to work and operate in a safe environment and be able to talk about it, be able to understand how to develop safe protocols is so important for working in academic or industrial jobs.
Okay, well, staying with the idea of quick thinking on your feet, why don't we stay with you and do a follow-up question to that? We've talked about K through 12 in the previous question. In terms of your platform, what are your thoughts on programs or partnerships that are needed to be established in terms of educational opportunities for adult learners, still younger chemists potentially, but those who've already exited the educational system in terms of formal training?
So Doug, assuming you want me to keep going.
Sorry, yes, when I said stay with you, I should have said stay with you, Peter.
Thank you. Well, I'm a big proponent of lifelong learning, and I think it's really critical for staying on top of your profession, particularly the changing policies and regulations that affect the industry, and that it doesn't matter whether you're in academics or in an industrial government sector. It brings also fresh perspectives and pedagogies into the classroom, and depending upon your job, if you're in an industry, you will find yourself being a teacher, instructing others, leading others, and so lifelong learning is really, really critical. ACS does offer specialty courses, short courses at national meetings and regional meetings, leadership development and other training opportunities. I am a facilitator in the leadership development system for ACS, and so I would be a failure if I didn't put in a plug for that. That is an important aspect of lifelong learning. And we should always be assessing the value of all of the things that we do, whether it's in the leadership development system or our short courses or any of the other instructional offerings that ACS has. The advisory board that I mentioned earlier would be invaluable at helping chart what's needed by industry in particular, and advising ACS about the kinds of courses and training that it should be developing, and it should be partnering with academic institutions to create. And of course, ACS needs to make all of these readily available to members. It should be a key part of being a member of ACS that you have access to these kinds of training modules.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. Going back to you, Tom, could you tell us a little bit about your stance regarding educational opportunities and programs for adult learners, following up on the K through 12 question previously?
Yes, thank you, Doug. I think an important point to make here is that a large number of major employers, anyway, of chemists do provide a fairly significant amount of continuing education opportunities for their employees. At least they have in the past. I think because so many of the places where chemists are finding jobs these days are in small startup companies that simply don't have those kinds of resources available. ACS has to essentially move into the gap that's been created. There's a recent survey, I believe, which indicated that more than a quarter of the employees at the companies that were surveyed had no access to significant professional development at their places of employment. And this means, they're not going to get a very important component of their continuing education that is going to make it possible for them to stay employed and to possibly have other options for employment as their careers progress. So I think it's really important that the ACS provide a kind of lifelong set of webinars and short courses and other things that essentially track our members and support our members as they move from the bench where they start to maybe that nascent supervisory role they have as a small group leader and keep on moving up. There needs to be essentially lifelong learning capacity built within the ACS continuing education cadre of offerings that really support our members all the way. Because what will happen inevitably is if we don't do this, if we simply stick with traditional chemistry topics for most of what we do in continuing education, we're simply going to lose members as they get promoted essentially away from the bench and into supervisory and administrative roles. So it is up to us to essentially stay with them and to continue to make it important for them to re-up every year when their renewal registration is required and to continue to be active ACS members.
Well, thank you, Tom. I have a question here from the audience that I'm going to go with next. And I think we've touched upon this a little bit, so maybe we'll repeat some things, but this is a good question from one of the audience members here. So they're saying that you both have addressed that the face of chemistry is changing. What kind of mentoring programs would you consider for rekindling this, or what other partnerships might you try to put in place to help create a more inclusive society? And Tom, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I'm a firm believer in the importance of providing mentoring at all levels. Some years ago, I was vice chair of the Council Policy Committee, and we started up a mentoring program for the hundreds of people who are voted by local sections and divisions to be counselors on the ACS, our sort of major deliberative and legislative body within ACS, because we realized that it took a long time. There was a steep learning curve for these newly elected counselors to really get a hang on what was going on in this fairly complicated governance structure. And so if they were going to be effective and effective quickly, and if they were going to simply enjoy their time in these positions, some additional work needed to be done, and mentors were in the perfect position to do it. So we organized that mentoring scheme, and it has been very successful. That same need to provide sage advice to people who are just coming along in whatever situation you have is certainly an important component of what it means for younger chemists especially to develop their skill sets, to develop an understanding of the way things are and maybe even where the shortcuts are and the most effective way of handling a problem. there's an awful lot that you're never going to, learn by reading a book. And this actually leads to this whole conversation I think we're probably going to have on networking. It is important to provide that sage mentoring that can make young people much more effective, much more quickly in whatever it is they're doing. So, yeah, I cannot say enough about the importance of having a system in place that provides this kind of very necessary mentoring if we are going to, maintain high levels of productivity and, quite frankly, make the job place a more enjoyable place to be.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tom. So, Peter, to you, the same question regarding the changing face of chemistry and what kind of mentoring programs you would rekindle or try to partner with in order to help it create a more inclusive society.
Thanks. I've seen a lot of really outstanding programs in my years with ACS, and Tom highlighted several of them. I want to speak about being more inclusive, and we have a standing advisory board on diversity that's part of the structure of ACS, and they advise the board of directors, and I will meet with them to better understand their perspectives on the needs of our members and their ideas on what we can do together. We have partner societies like Novachet, Socinus, of which I'm a member, ACIS, Abracams, among others, and they have some great examples of mentoring programs for students, for young professionals, and even advanced professionals that we can enhance together to meet the needs of our members. Mentoring young professionals in industry is also critically important as part of their growing careers and along with academics. And I think ACS can fill that gap. For student members, we can, for example, build off the ACS Scholars Program, and I'd like to see us create a more comprehensive Mentor the Mentor program to encourage more mentors to step forward to support the ACS Scholars Program, and that dovetails with my plan to continue to build the endowment for scholarships for ACS and grow that Scholars Program. If we're going to grow the Scholars Program, we need to grow the mentors for those scholars, and I think a Mentoring the Mentors program is right in line with that.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. So this next question is actually one that I've seen myself throughout the years, and so I'm actually quite interested in the responses to these ones on a personal level from the time I was in grad school and seeing it still remain an issue. So here's the question. Most younger chemists only get memberships to attend the national conferences and are leaving before reaping the benefits of our society. How would you integrate them better and get them more involved in ACS governance and the society as a whole post a national meeting? And so, as I said, this is something that I've seen throughout my time, and I'm sure others have as well. So let's start with Peter on this one in terms of what your thought is regarding memberships for chemists who only sign up for national meetings.
Well, thanks, Doug. You heard me say this earlier. ACS has a failure to communicate very effectively about the benefits of being a member. First, we will evaluate how we communicate to the members and become much better at it. I said earlier, we can learn a lot from YCC and how it engages its constituents and creates events just like this. Local section YCCs, programming at local and regional meetings, and continuing to enhance the tracks at national meetings should be part of this strategy. We already have undergraduate tracks and graduate tracks at national meetings. I think we ought to be doing the same thing for our regional meetings. That helps in every regional meeting. I've seen it done very effectively at some. We can do better. It needs to be part of that strategy for integrating our younger chemists into the ACS. Now, I was looking for a way to work this into the conversation, but I've created a fun game show event that I've taken on the road, and I'm glad to take on the road again in the future. It's called ACS Jeopardy, and that makes learning about ACS governance and opportunities in ACS a little less monotonous. And all kidding aside, I will ask ACS staff to help me enhance this further and take it a little bit more out on the road. I just think it'll be a fun way of learning about the opportunities for professional growth at ACS and a little bit of the workings of the society.
Well, thank you, Peter. I've seen ACS Jeopardy before and even made a fool out of myself in the process. So thank you for taking that to the masses. Tom, let's go to you with the same question, and I'll read it out again so you can hear it from the beginning. Most younger chemists only get memberships to attend the national conference and are leaving before reaping the benefits of our society. How would you integrate them better and get them more involved in ACS governance and the society as a whole post-national meetings?
Well, I'm a firm believer in getting them when they're young, and I think we are missing an opportunity if we don't do a more effective job of reaching out to the very youngest of our members, namely the student members, especially those who are enrolled in chemistry programs at the many hundreds of ACS-approved baccalaureate programs. Altogether, there's about 50,000 young people in those programs at any one time. Now, not all of them are going to get ACS certified degrees, and certainly not all of them are going to be ACS members. But if every single one of those colleges or universities had a really active student chapter, one that had intriguing programming that involved networking and professional skill building and outreach programs that really had a kind of emotional feedback for their students, and particularly ones that maybe reach out to the community surrounding their colleges and universities, that focuses on young K-12 students, perhaps even students at junior colleges or community colleges who maybe need an extra boost to get them to go from where they are up to a four-year college and major in a science or mathematics or engineering. There are a lot of things that I think we can do to really entice this population of students to get more deeply involved. And if they are more deeply involved as student members, then when they graduate, there's a chance that those student members will become regular members. And then we have an opportunity to work with them and to make it clear to them through continuing activities that they now maybe have a kind of we're used to it feeling about it, and they've seen and experienced the benefits of it, that they will continue to be involved in ACS, and they will maybe perhaps get involved in the next level of committee work at the local section level, or perhaps maybe even run for ACS council. We had a counselor from the Northeastern section who was all of 24 years old when she was elected for the first time. It can happen if that early engagement takes place and students really fully understand the dynamics of being an ACS member.
Thank you, Tom. We've gotten a few questions throughout the event so far this evening, so I'm going to actually take this opportunity to switch gears a little bit, and we have a few questions that are not as directly ACS related, and they more pertain to the broader chemical enterprise. So the first one I'm going to go with here is, in lieu of our own national election process occurring, what would you highlight when speaking with government leaders, and I think this we're referring to outside of the ACS governance when we say this, leaders on behalf of younger chemists, on behalf of the younger chemist population. So Tom, let's go with you on this question here.
So Doug, let me understand this. The question has to do with discussions with political leaders, for example, having to do with promoting chemistry and the future employment of younger chemists.
Yeah, I'm reading this question that was submitted to us. I think what they're saying is if you had the opportunity to stand on Capitol Hill and address the government on behalf of the younger chemist population, what would the message be to them in terms of, which things are of most importance on a national stage, not just in terms of the ACS?
Okay. Well, certainly one of the things that, both Peter and I have been members of the board of directors, and I would imagine Peter, like I, had our days on Capitol Hill, knocking on doors in Senate office buildings and House office buildings, trying to convince our elected officials of the worthiness of our causes. It can be a very frustrating business, especially these days. But then occasionally you get a bit of a victory. And in fact, we got one back last December when both the Congress and the President approved a plan to make it possible for industries to take off their taxes the money they're investing in research and development. Up until that point, that had never been a permanent part of the tax code. Obviously, when those kinds of decisions are made, that has a huge impact on employment opportunities for all scientists and certainly for chemists and especially for younger chemists. I think we also need to make it clear to these folks how big a part of the U.S. economy chemistry-based industries are. As well as, for example, just the educational enterprise within this country. There are an enormous number of students that come to the U.S. from overseas, and they come here for a very good reason. This is the place you go if you want to get a top-notch graduate education. So there are some things that I believe we can do to make it clear to the folks in Washington and in state houses that ACS, and for that matter, the chemical enterprise, provides an important boost to our economy. And if we're going to maintain our competitive edge and to continue to be world leaders, we need to bring the next generation of contributors to the cause along, and that can only happen if we support the youngest members in our organization.
Thank you, Tom. And so, Peter, I'll state the question in the same way since I respoke it based on how it was written here. So the way that I presented the question to Tom was, given the opportunity to speak on Capitol Hill, what would your message be to leaders, when speaking on behalf of the younger chemist population?
Well, my experience has been both in my time on the board, as Tom alluded, and advocating for research as part of my day job here at K-State. Most politicians and staffers that I've met with believe that academics are fairly insular and that the research we do is esoteric at best. And at K-State and in the state of Kansas, I've been promoting more academic industry partnerships to our elected officials, not just for the reasons that Tom cited earlier, which have to do with changes in the tax codes, but to enhance the student experiences. Many industries don't see the advantage of partnering with colleges or universities, except for that research partnership. And even then, some places are much easier to work with than others. Congress really should reward industries for working with academic institutions beyond just research, but those who are providing internships and helping develop a pipeline of well-trained professionals needs to be recognized and rewarded too. We also need to have them focus on ensuring our economic environment supports businesses, big and small, and promotes entrepreneurship. I think more funding for SBIR and STTR programs would go a long way to help small businesses be in a stronger position to support students, student internships, but also to just simply support those emerging businesses that are really becoming the foundation of the research, very creative research enterprise that we have here in the United States.
Okay, well, thank you, Peter. As we start to get closer to the end of our time that we have for this evening, I'm going to try to find a few follow-up questions that I think are particularly interesting here to finish up with. And I guess they're not really follow-up because they're going to be asked for the first time. But I have this one here that was given to me that says, a concerned younger chemist referenced a recent webinar that they saw about chemophobia. Have you ever experienced this in your personal life? And what do you think about this in terms of how the society could address this? There are certain things out there regarding GMOs, climate change, water quality, cosmetics. These are just to name a few. And there's also the fear, but there's also misunderstanding. Can you address what your thoughts are on the outside understanding of the chemical sciences and how you may address this fear or misunderstanding that sometimes is pervasive as a potential president of the ACS? I think, if I recall, we were going with Peter first on this question. Peter?
Okay. Well, of course. I mean, the answer is of course. I've gotten it from my students in my classes. I'm often speaking at Rotary. I get it there. Again, when I'm out working with elected officials around the state in particular, and in scouting. I mean, Rotary, scouting, those are my personal areas of interest. And I find that loud and forgive the expression, ignorant voices often carry more credibility than us scientists. We've lost credibility due to a number of incidents and accidents throughout history, and people continue to hold them up as really bad examples. And we need to earn back the credibility and the trust from the public, and our voices need to be louder. We need a clear, comprehensive communication strategy from the ACS. And that begins with the leadership team. That begins with the presidential succession and the board, identifying how we're going to earn back that trust. And I think we're not going to get really very far. I recall that Bassam Shakashiri, former president of ACS, had a presidential event on understanding the science of climate change, and he had folks from both sides of the issues talking about the science, and I thought that was extremely valuable, and it didn't get very far and much traction because people simply ignored the scientist perspective. So I think we need a clear communication strategy from ACS.
Thank you, Peter. Tom, what are your thoughts on this topic of chemphobia, and what have your experiences been, and how would you look to address this as ACS president-elect and ACS president?
Well, it is certainly real, although it's interesting how different parts of the world have different ideas about what things they should really be, scared witless about. It seems in this country there is a population, for example, that's totally convinced that climate change is some kind of a strange conspiracy, and the other parts of the world are convinced similarly about things like GMOs. Or for that matter, a few years ago, the whole concept of biotechnology was, literally verboten in Germany. It's hard to essentially convince huge numbers of people of a belief they have which is not based on science and is not based on fact, if there's enough support for that. And the problem, of course, we have these days is that with the internet and with the sort of selective reinforcement that comes with it, it is quite possible for people to continue to believe something despite the complete lack of data to, confirm anything close to what they believe in. So how do we deal with that? A tough question, because what we've done so far apparently hasn't been effective. I think one of the things that we need to do, both individually and as members of ACS, is to simply reach out to people one-on-one, people that we know, where we live, in our towns and cities, and simply, as every opportunity comes along, interject in a conversation something that actually makes it quite clear that we're coming at this particular issue from the perspective of a scientist who deals day by day in data-driven decision-making, and that's a way better way to decide things than some of the recent alternatives we've seen. For years and years, I've been involved in my local town governance as a member first of an organization called the Conservation Commission, and then for the last 10 elections as a member of our Board of Health. And as a chemist, you bring to a Board of Health a kind of perspective which is not the same one as you're going to get from a an MD or a dentist or somebody who doesn't have that kind of molecular science understanding of what's going on when a particular health issue comes along. And people, after a while, begin to understand the benefit and the importance of having that kind of perspective. So I think there's a lot that we can do, like with the Chemical Ambassadors Program, in terms of one-on-one interactions with our next-door neighbors. And at the same time, we do need to think more globally about things that we do with the support of our folks in Washington to essentially try to counteract as best we can some of the utter silliness that's out there that flies in the face of anything approaching data-driven decision-making.
Okay. Well, thank you very much there, Tom. So I think we're going to go to our last question based off the time it is in the evening. And so the last question that I'm going to ask here tonight is a little bit more along the personal lines, going back to when you were a younger chemist yourself. And so for this question, we'd like to be able to ask you about when you were a younger chemist, could you tell us a little bit about your mentor or somebody that helped to get you to the next stage of your career? This can be either somebody inside or outside of chemistry. Some perspective on yourself as a person and what allowed you to succeed to the levels that you are today. And we're going to go with Tom on this one first.
Thanks, Doug. Well, when I think back to the people who made a difference in my career, I start with that high energy, fresh out of teacher school, high school chemistry teacher I had, who, in fact, when I first wrote a textbook, I dedicated it to him. A person who essentially made chemistry come alive, and who, in fact, worked so hard at it that he was able to actually get a grant from the NSF to sponsor some research in collaboration with some colleagues at Cornell. And in fact, when I was finishing up that program, actually my first presentation as a high school junior was at a seminar at Cornell University, and I got to tell you what an amazing feeling that was. So that impact was huge in directing me toward chemistry. And then after that came a decision early on to get involved in both chemistry and environmental science and marine chemistry, which led to my job at the aquarium, which was a whole other experience I really don't have time to talk about now. But then when I first went to the university, I think, and Peter knows this, everybody knows this, who's been through the upward spiral of first assistant professor and then you work your way up the line. You need to have someone basically looking out for you if you're going to succeed in that progression and to climb the ladder. And for me, there was an amazing gentleman as well as excellent mass spectroscopist. I'm going to use his name. It's Paul Voros. I use it only because he's going to be retiring at the end of the year. And his help in simply guiding me through the process of learning the ropes in an academic setting and planning and making careful decisions that were in my long-term best interest were enormous. So the importance of having that kind of mentoring in the early stages of one's career is essential. We were talking about mentoring a little while ago. Can't say enough about how important it is if you're looking at the success rate of young chemists. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tom. I know time was short there, but we appreciate you sharing some of your personal story with us. So let's move to you, Peter. And so let's talk about when you were younger yourself, that person that may have influenced or motivated you. And again, this can be somebody inside or outside of the chemistry profession in terms of helping you with that stage of your career.
So I've had several along my path. I'll go back even earlier than my undergraduate days. Before all of that was my scouting mentor, Tom Page. He was my scoutmaster, and he recognized my leadership potential and encouraged me, even as my family situation was in flux. And I'm an Eagle Scout because of him. And he was someone who helped me understand my potential, helped me understand that anything was achievable. And so by the time I got to college, started interfacing with faculty at Illinois who helped me get connected through undergraduate research, connected to co-op. My co-op mentor at DuPont, Steve Ittle, he helped me understand the industrial chemistry world, and then my mentor at Los Alamos helped me discover that career path in underground nuclear testing was going to have a very short half-life. So I'd better start thinking about another option, and I transmutated and went into academics. So, and I continue to have and seek out mentors from within the chemistry community, from within the research, as well as the legislative now community to help me with my daily job. So you're never too young and you're never too old to have a mentor.
Well, thank you, Peter. And with that, I'll turn things back over to Stephanie within a moment. And let me just say one more time that, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I was very glad that I could be with you here tonight to moderate this event. And I wish you both the best of luck in the upcoming election. And Stephanie, we'll take it back to you.
Thank you, Doug. So I would like to thank our audience for submitting their questions live. And being able to share those with our candidates tonight. Again, if you would like to become involved with YCC, feel free to reach out to us at info@yccacs.org. I'm sure the candidates would be interested in hearing more from you as well, and their contact information can be found on their websites. The candidates have also answered some other questions online that we've posted, and you can go and visit those, maybe something that wasn't touched that you were interested in. And I would also like to thank you, Doug, for leading this session, and again to our candidates. This has been a long time in the planning this and getting everyone here tonight. So on behalf of YCC, thank you. And we hope that no matter who's elected, that you will both use the YCC as a resource for increasing the involvement of younger chemists in the ACS at all levels. And so thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.